I didn't realize the dead had changed until I heard them beneath my window. Quiet, too quiet. For weeks, the infected had been nothing more than stumbling silhouettes, moaning and dragging themselves across the ruined streets. But that night, the sound wasn't a groan. It was a breath. A sharp, hungry inhale, like something was tasting the air. I woke up instantly, my heart already racing before my mind fully caught up. Something outside was different. Something was wrong. The moonlight cut across the fractured parking lot, and that's when I saw it. One of the dead crouched low, its head tilted upward as if smelling the night. And then, without warning, it sprinted. Not shuffled, not staggered. Sprinted, fast enough to blur past the burned-out cars. I froze in my bed, watching its shadow streak across the pavement. The infection had evolved. They weren't slow anymore. They weren't clumsy. They were hunters now. When the creature crashed into the metal fencing beside my building, it didn't stop. It slammed again and again, metal groaning beneath its weight. Others heard. They emerged from the darkness, scurrying on limbs like broken animals, drawn to the noise, drawn to the chase. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the fence tremble, bending with each impact. I knew it wouldn't hold. Across the hallway, someone screamed. A neighbor, Mrs. K, old, frail, living alone since the outbreak. Her scream cut through the silence like a blade, and instantly every running corpse turned its head toward the sound. I watched them pause, twitching, eyes shining with hunger. Then they bolted toward the building entrance. That was the moment I understood. Tonight wasn't about surviving the infected. Tonight was about surviving what they had become. And I had no idea if anyone in this building would still be alive when the sun came up, including me. I didn't have time to process what I had just witnessed. The dead were no longer the slow, predictable creatures we had learned to avoid. They had evolved into something far more dangerous, something that could think, stalk, and most terrifying of all, run. As their footsteps echoed through the stairwell of my building, I forced myself to breathe slowly, quietly, praying they would choose another floor. But deep down I knew the truth. Tonight, no one was safe. Not the families hiding behind locked doors, not the elderly praying quietly in their darkened apartments, and definitely not me. I pressed my back against the cold wall of my tiny room, listening as the building groaned under the weight of panic. Somewhere, someone was shouting orders, maybe a father, maybe a brother, while others sobbed, whispered, or tried to barricade their doors. Every sound was a signal, every noise was an invitation, and the creatures outside were listening. Their footsteps weren't random anymore. They were coordinated, sharp, rapid thuds, like animals circling prey they could already taste. Somewhere between fear and instinct I remembered something important, something I had nearly forgotten in the chaos. You, the person watching this story. Before this night continues, before I take you deeper into the last hours I almost didn't survive, I need you to do something for me. If you're here because you love dark, atmospheric zombie survival stories, if you want more real-time chronicles of nights just like this one, then make sure you subscribe to Last Day Chronicles. It's the only way these stories continue. Hit the like button and comment your country and city. I want to know where survivors like you are watching from. Now breathe. Stay quiet. The night isn't over. The dead are still moving, and what happened next is something I'll never forget. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the hallway was the silence. Thick, unnatural, a silence that felt aware. The building was usually alive with whispers, arguments, children crying, radios playing static. But now, nothing. Even the old pipes which rattled every time someone flushed stood as quiet as the dead outside. I held my breath and listened. Somewhere far below, a single footstep echoed upward. Then another, Then another, precise, measured, fast. The sound of something climbing. I moved cautiously toward the stairwell, gripping the metal pipe I had turned into a makeshift weapon 2 weeks earlier. It wasn't much, just a rusted length of iron I'd ripped from the boiler room, but it felt like something solid in a world that was falling apart. When I peeked down the stairwell shaft, moonlight from the cracked windows revealed a shape, thin, pale, twitching, climbing the stairs on all fours like a spider. Joints cracked with each movement, limbs bending at impossible angles. My stomach twisted. The creature paused on the landing below me. Its neck snapped upward at an inhuman speed, and its eyes, two pale, cloudy orbs, fixed precisely on mine. I froze. It didn't growl, it didn't screech, it simply stared, chest rising and falling with fast, shallow breaths, as if storing energy. Preparing. I knew if I ran, I wouldn't outrun it. If I fought, I wouldn't overpower it. My only chance was to move silently and hope its senses weren't as sharp as its reflexes. Without breaking eye contact, I stepped back into the hall, letting the shadows swallow me. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat loud enough to betray me. The creature twitched once, just once, and then lunged upward, sprinting up the stairs with impossible speed. The sound was a blur, a flurry of impacts echoing like rapid gunfire. I ducked behind the corner just as it reached my floor. If it saw me, that would have been the end. I kept still. I didn't breathe. The creature sniffed the air, short, sharp inhales like a dog tracking a trail. Its shadow stretched across the wall, distorted by the emergency lights that flickered overhead. It stepped closer, and closer. I gripped the metal pipe tighter, knowing it was useless but unable to let go. Then, somewhere at the opposite end of the hall, a door clicked. A tiny, helpless sound. The creature's head snapped in that direction, its entire body freezing like a statue. Then it ran. Not toward me, toward the sound. The door at the far end burst open and a man stumbled out, screaming for help. I recognized him instantly. Thomas, the young college kid who lived on the corner. He'd always been friendly, lending people spare batteries, sharing food when he could. Now he ran barefoot, terrified, sprinting down the hall as the creature chased behind him with terrifying speed. Thomas reached my corner a second before the creature did. His eyes met mine, wide, pleading, before he tripped over a fallen lamp and crashed to the floor. I grabbed him under the arms, pulling him toward my apartment, but the creature was already upon us. It slammed into him, jaws snapping inches from his throat. I swung the metal pipe with all the strength I had. The impact cracked against its skull, but it barely reacted. It simply turned its pale eyes toward me. The creature lunged again. I dragged Thomas through the doorway and slammed it shut, twisting the deadbolt just as the infected hurled itself at the wood. The entire frame shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Thomas gasped, trembling, clutching my arm. The creature snarled. A new sound, sharp and furious, and slammed again. The door wouldn't hold long. We barricaded it with a dresser, then a wooden table, and finally the refrigerator. The pounding grew louder, stronger, faster. Thomas collapsed onto the floor, clutching his ankle. It was bleeding, scratched, torn but not bitten. Not yet. I wrapped it quickly with torn cloth while he tried to steady his breathing. Outside the barricade, the infected ran itself against the door over and over, each hit splintering the frame further. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. We both knew we were one hit away from dying. Then suddenly, silence. No footsteps, no snarls, not even breathing. The creature had vanished as quickly as it arrived, and that terrified me more than anything it had done before. Predators leave only when they've found something better, or when they're preparing to return. And somewhere deep inside me I knew this thing wasn't done with us, not even close. For several long minutes, Thomas and I stayed frozen in the dim glow of my apartment, listening for any sign that the creature was still outside. The only sound was Thomas's ragged breathing and the distant wind pushing through broken windows on the upper floors. I pressed my ear against the barricaded door. Nothing. No scraping, no footsteps, no snarls. But that silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like the kind of quiet a predator leaves behind when it knows its prey has nowhere else to run. Thomas tried to stand, but the pain in his ankle forced him back down. "It wasn't a bite," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You saw, right?" I nodded. His skin was scratched, torn by debris or maybe by the creature's nails. But no bite mark. Not the kind that meant infection. Still, in this new world, fear wasn't rational. Harm didn't need teeth to kill you. Panic could do it just as fast. "You're okay," I said softly, even though I wasn't completely sure. "We just need to keep quiet and figure out what it wants." I moved to the window and peeled back a sliver of the heavy curtain. Outside, the street was a graveyard of toppled cars, abandoned bicycles, and distant fires that never stopped burning. But something was different tonight. The infected weren't wandering aimlessly. They weren't clustering at random corners like lost souls. They were moving, purposefully, gathering near the intersection as if waiting for something. A group of 5 ran together, pacing in circles like wolves testing their perimeter. When one stopped suddenly and lifted its head, the others copied the motion perfectly. It wasn't just one of them that had changed. They all had. I let the curtain fall, my hands shaking. Thomas watched me, fear twisting across his face. "What did you see?" he asked. I didn't know how to tell him that everything outside had evolved into something far more coordinated, far more intelligent, far more deadly. Instead, I said, "We can't stay here all night. If they get inside the building for real, we'll be trapped on this floor with nowhere to go." Thomas winced as he adjusted his injured leg. "Then we need a plan." He was right. And as strange as it sounded, the presence of another living person gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: responsibility. I couldn't just think about myself anymore. I needed to keep him alive. Us alive. I scanned the room for anything we could use: backpacks, water bottles, a half-empty first aid kit, a hammer, a flashlight with almost dead batteries. Not much, but enough to start thinking like a survivor again. The creature had come from below. The pack outside was gathering. That meant the safest route was upward. Maybe the roof, maybe the emergency ladder that led to the adjacent building. If we could get to higher ground, maybe we could disappear into the night before the infected realized we'd moved. "We head up," I said. 2 floors, quiet, slow. We check every corner before moving. Thomas swallowed hard but nodded. "I can move," he said. "Just not fast." We removed part of the barricade, just enough to slip through. The hallway outside was empty, but the air felt thick, charged, as if the walls themselves resented our presence. Every sound, every breath, every footstep felt amplified. We crept toward the stairwell, stepping over shattered picture frames and fallen coats left behind by neighbors who'd fled days earlier. My grip tightened around the metal pipe. If the creature returned, speed wouldn't save us. Only strategy. Only silence. At the stairwell entrance, I paused and leaned just enough to see the landing. Blood smeared across the railing, handprints, drag marks, but no bodies. That meant someone had been taken, or had crawled away. Thomas inhaled sharply behind me when he saw it. "We should go back," he whispered. I shook my head. "If we stay down here, we're dead. We go up, now." The building creaked. Distant echoes bounced through the stairwell, too faint to place. We began climbing, 1 step at a time. Careful, controlled. Every sound felt like it might give us away. We'd made it halfway to the next floor when a cold breeze swept downward from above. Unnatural, sudden, sharp. I froze. That breeze didn't come from a broken window. It came from movement. Something up there was shifting the air. Something waiting. I raised my hand to stop Thomas from taking another step. The stairwell went silent again, too silent. Then, faintly, from somewhere above us, the click of claws tapping on concrete. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate. We weren't climbing toward safety, we were climbing toward whatever the dead had become. The sound of claws tapping above us wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Sharp, deliberate, almost thoughtful. Thomas's breathing hitched, and I felt him grip the railing to steady himself. The stairwell felt tighter now, like the concrete walls had shrunk inward to trap us between floors. I tightened my hold on the metal pipe, feeling the slickness of sweat against my palm. We couldn't go up blindly, and we couldn't go back down either. The creature from earlier was somewhere below, and the pack outside would be drawn to any sound we made. We were sandwiched between predators, and the night was only getting worse. I motioned for Thomas to stay still, then slowly leaned forward, peering up toward the next landing. A faint glow of moonlight spilled across the concrete, enough to reveal a trail of something dark and sticky. Blood. Not fresh, dried. Streaks led toward a half-open door on the next floor. The claws clicked again, this time slightly faster, as if agitated. The door creaked an inch wider. The darkness beyond it seemed alive, shifting with the weight of something unseen. I swallowed hard. Whatever waited up there wasn't just another infected. It felt aware. Thomas whispered shakily, "What do we do?" I didn't answer immediately. Every option felt fatal, but stopping wasn't an option. Staying in the stairwell meant waiting to die. "We move," I said finally, my voice barely audible. "Quiet and slow, stay behind me." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt I felt in my own chest. Still, we crept upward, step by trembling step, flinching at the sound of each slight creak beneath our feet. When we reached the next landing, the open door loomed inches away, its rusted hinges trembling softly with the wind, or something breathing. I raised my pipe, ready to swing at anything that lunged. Thomas crouched low, gripping a broken wooden chair leg he had picked up earlier. I nudged the door with the tip of my foot. It swung fully inward, revealing a dark, abandoned office space, littered with overturned desks and shattered glass. A draft rolled out, carrying the acrid smell of rot. And then I saw it, just for a second. A figure crouched atop a desk, pale limbs folded underneath like a grotesque animal preparing to pounce. Its eyes gleamed faintly, reflecting the moonlight behind us. But before I could react, it darted into the shadows with impossible speed, scattering papers into the air. Thomas gasped, stumbling backward until he hit the wall. "It's watching us," he whispered. "It's waiting." And he was right. The creature wasn't attacking. It was studying us, learning us. That was new and deeply terrifying. I stepped carefully into the room, forcing myself to breathe steadily. My heart hammered so loudly I feared the creature could hear it. The office was a maze of cubicles, each one a potential hiding place. The air was thick with dust and the metallic scent of old blood. I motioned for Thomas to stay close as we navigated between the partitions. A soft shuffle echoed from behind a filing cabinet ahead, then another, then silence. My skin crawled. This thing wasn't wandering. It was circling. Suddenly a loud crash shook the room, a cabinet tipping over in the far corner. Papers exploded into the air like a flock of startled birds. Thomas jumped, raising his makeshift weapon. "Over there," he whispered harshly. But I wasn't convinced. The crash was too obvious, too dramatic, a distraction. The real threat had to be somewhere else. I scanned the shadows, turning slowly, pipe raised, listening for the faintest breath. And that's when I heard it. Behind us. The creature lunged from above, dropping from a ceiling beam with terrifying precision. Its claws scraped the metal as it landed on all fours, inches from Thomas. He screamed and swung his wooden leg wildly, connecting with the creature's shoulder. It recoiled, but only for a moment. Then it moved, fast, too fast, circling us in a blur. I swung my pipe, barely grazing its arm. It hissed, a low, guttural sound that rattled my spine, then retreated into the darkness once more. Thomas collapsed against a desk, panting. "We can't fight that," he said. "We'll die here." I pressed my back to his, both of us turning in opposite directions, trying to track every shadow. "We're not fighting it," I said. "We're outsmarting it." I spotted a door near the emergency exit sign, a maintenance closet with vents leading upward. If we could get inside, wedge something against the door, and crawl through the vents, we might reach the roof. It was a desperate plan. But desperation was all we had. I pointed toward the closet. "On my signal, we run." Thomas nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. Then, from somewhere in the dark, the creature clicked its claws again, slow, deliberate, almost mocking. It knew we were cornered, and it was enjoying it. I gripped the pipe tightly. "Now," I whispered, and we ran for our lives. We sprinted toward the maintenance closet, our footsteps pounding against the cracked tile floor as the creature's snarls echoed behind us. Every instinct screamed for me to look back, but I didn't dare. Its speed would only paralyze me. Thomas stumbled once but managed to regain his footing, clutching my shoulder as we barreled through the narrow doorway. I slammed it shut, twisting the old metal latch just as something crashed against the other side. The entire door shuddered. Thomas collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. "It followed us," he whispered, voice trembling. "It knew where we'd go." The creature slammed the door again, harder this time. Dust drifted from the ceiling like falling ash. The hinges squealed in protest. We dragged a shelving unit in front of the door, then a bucket filled with old tools, then an overturned locker. None of it felt like enough. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard it breathing, fast, excited, as if it knew it had cornered us again. But then something changed. The breathing slowed. The claws tapped once, twice, then silence. Not retreat. Waiting. The maintenance closet was barely large enough for 2 people, filled with mops, rusted pipes, and ancient cleaning supplies. The air was stifling, thick with mildew. I pointed to the vent near the ceiling, a metal grate barely wide enough for us to squeeze through. "That's our way out," I said. Thomas looked up, eyes widening. "You think it'll hold?" I shrugged. "It's the only shot we've got." We worked quickly, pulling loose screws with the tools scattered across the floor. The creature outside shifted, claws scraping softly against the door, like it was listening to our every move. As the grate loosened, a thin shaft of cold air blew into the room. Freedom, or at least a chance at it. I boosted Thomas upward first, pushing him toward the vent opening. The metal groaned under his weight but held. "Go," I whispered. "I'll follow." He hesitated, shaking his head. "You should go first." I forced a grim smile. "If this thing breaks through, you won't stand a chance on your own." He swallowed hard, then climbed into the duct, disappearing into the shadows ahead. I climbed after him, arms trembling with effort as my feet scraped against the wall. Just as I pulled myself inside, the creature struck the door again, this time with a crack so loud it sounded like the wood had split. I froze halfway in the vent. The door was seconds from giving way. I shoved upward with all my strength, pulling my legs inside just as the latch snapped off and the barricade crashed inward. The creature burst into the room below, its pale form twisting unnaturally as it scanned the ceiling. It lifted its head toward the vent and smiled, a thin, warped curl of its lips that chilled my blood. Thomas grabbed my arm and pulled me deeper into the duct. "Move," he whispered fiercely. The vent echoed with every shift of our bodies, each crawl sending metallic vibrations through the walls. Behind us, claws scraped against the metal grate. The creature was testing it, evaluating it, hunting through logic instead of instinct. "It's following," Thomas cried out. I didn't need to look back to know he was right. The duct rattled violently. The creature was either climbing the wall or smashing at the metal from below. We crawled faster, turning down a narrow duct that led toward the roof access. The air grew colder, the space tighter. My knees burned with every push, and my hands slipped on dust and rust flakes. Thomas moved as quickly as his injured leg allowed, breathing hard, gritting his teeth with every motion. Behind us, a thunderous clang rattled the entire vent. The creature had struck the underside with enough force to dent it. Metal bent inward, sharp edges splitting open like a wound. A pale hand shot through the cracked opening, clawing wildly. I yanked my leg away as the hand swiped inches from my boot. The creature snarled, a warped, choking sound that echoed through the ducts. Thomas screamed, scrambling forward. "It's going to pull us down," he yelled. I turned and swung the metal pipe through the narrow space, smashing its fingers. The creature shrieked, withdrawing for a moment, but not far. The dent grew deeper. The metal threatened to collapse entirely. "Keep moving," I shouted. The duct ahead sloped upward, leading toward faint moonlight leaking through a loose vent cover. I could see the outline of the roof hatch beyond it, a silhouette of hope against the ruin below. Thomas reached it first, pushing against the grate until it snapped outward. Cold night air rushed in. He climbed through and extended his hand back to me. I grabbed it just as another violent impact nearly ripped the duct open behind us. I hauled myself onto the roof, rolling onto the cracked asphalt surface as the vent collapsed behind me. The creature's arm jutted through the opening, claws slashing violently, but it couldn't fit its entire body through. For now, we were out of reach. Thomas collapsed beside me, breathing hard. The night sky stretched above us, cold, empty, vast. But below, the dead were still gathering. And now one of them was learning, watching, waiting for us to make our next mistake. The roof was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that slid beneath your skin and settled there like a warning. From up high, the city stretched out in all directions, broken, bleeding, burning. Fires smoldered in distant towers, casting eerie orange halos into the night sky. Sirens wailed far away, fading and returning like dying screams. But it wasn't the chaos on the horizon that terrified me. It was the movement below. Dozens of the dead were gathering around our building, pacing, circling, sniffing the air as if drawn by the faint echo of our escape. And above them, the moonlit clouds drifted silently, witnesses to a world unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. Thomas limped toward the ledge, gripping the railing for balance. "They're everywhere," he whispered. I joined him, scanning the streets. "They know we're up here." The infected didn't look confused or disoriented. They were organized, moving with strange coordination, forming loose semicircles that tightened and spread like hunting patterns. Some gazed upward, as if searching for shapes on the rooftop. Others sniffed the air intensely, pacing restlessly. And then, in the center of them all, one creature lifted its head and let out a sharp, guttural call. The rest froze instantly. The building trembled. Not from wind, not from noise. Something was climbing. Thomas stumbled backward, nearly falling. "It's coming up," he whispered harshly. I sprinted to the hatch, still open, the vent below it crushed and bent from the creature's assault. I peeked inside. Darkness, no movement. But the metal groaned, bending inward again as something massive pressed against it. "We can't stay here," I said. "If it reaches the roof, we're done." Thomas nodded, fear tightening his expression. "Where do we go?" There was only one option, the adjacent building. A rusted maintenance bridge connected the two rooftops, but only partially. Half of it had collapsed long ago, leaving a jagged metal skeleton hanging between the structures. A jump might be possible, for someone not injured. For someone not being hunted by something faster, stronger, and smarter than any infected we had ever seen. But doing nothing wasn't an option. "We go across," I said, pointing toward the broken bridge. "It's risky," Thomas replied, "so is staying here." We rushed toward the edge. Wind whipped against us, carrying the distant stench of ash and decay. The gap between rooftops was wider than I remembered, 6, maybe 7 feet. A survivable jump for me. But Thomas's ankle was swelling badly, his leg trembling with every step. He looked at the distance, then at me. "I don't think I can make that." I grabbed his shoulder. "Then I'll get you across." Before he could protest, the roof hatch behind us exploded upward. Metal shards flew across the rooftop like shrapnel. The creature crawled out, not climbing but unfolding itself, limbs extending like a grotesque marionette. Its pale skin shimmered under the moonlight, and its head turned slowly toward us with deliberate precision. It didn't roar. It didn't rush. It simply started walking forward with unnatural grace, each step measured, confident. It knew we had nowhere else to go. Thomas backed away in panic, nearly slipping on loose gravel. "We need to move," he cried. "Now!" I positioned Thomas near the broken bridge, bracing him. "When I say jump, jump," I said. He shook his head violently. "I can't." "You have to." The creature accelerated suddenly, its movements blurring into terrifying speed. I grabbed Thomas's arm. "Jump!" He leaped, barely clearing the gap, landing awkwardly on the other side. He screamed as his ankle buckled beneath him, collapsing instantly. I didn't wait. I ran and jumped, landing hard beside him. The creature sprinted toward the gap, then stopped. It stared at us, calculating, its head tilting with a disturbing curiosity. Then, shockingly, it stepped back. Not out of fear. Strategy. It turned and ran toward the far side of the roof, toward a point where the buildings were closer. My heart dropped. "It's trying to find another way across," I whispered. "It's thinking," Thomas said, horror filling his voice. "It's actually thinking." We scrambled away from the ledge, desperate to find shelter on the new rooftop. A rusted service door stood nearby. I tried the handle. It was locked. I slammed my shoulder against it once, twice. The metal groaned, but held. The creature was moving fast now, circling with predatory intent. I struck the door again with my pipe. It cracked open. Thomas crawled inside, and I followed, slamming it shut behind us just as the creature reached the edge of the roof. Inside, darkness swallowed us once more. But at least this time, there was a door between us and the thing hunting us. We collapsed onto the dusty floor, gasping for breath. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Thomas whispered, How do we fight something like that?" I looked at him, then at the shaking door. "We don't fight it," I said, my voice low and hollow. "We outrun it, or we die trying." We sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the muffled sounds of the creature pacing the rooftop outside. Slow, controlled, patient. It didn't rage. It didn't scream. It simply waited, as if it understood that exhaustion would finish what it couldn't reach. And maybe it was right. My arms trembled. Thomas's ankle was swelling to twice its size. We were both bleeding, bruised, exhausted. This wasn't the world we once knew. This wasn't the dead we once feared. This was something new, something evolving, something that might soon be unstoppable. In that moment of heavy silence, I realized something important, something I had forgotten amid the chaos. The dead didn't win because they were stronger. They won because they changed, they adapted, they learned. And if we wanted to survive even one more night, we would have to do the same. I looked at Thomas, who stared back at me with a mix of terror and determination. He wasn't giving up, and neither was I. Not yet. Not tonight. When morning finally arrived, the creature was gone. But its message lingered with the cold wind that swept across the ruined rooftops. The dead are becoming something else, and the living have very little time left. I don't know how much longer we can run. I don't know how many nights like this we can survive, but I'm still here, and as long as I am, this is only the beginning of my chronicle.